It's 2004 and I am 7 years old. I'm lying in bed at night, trying to fall asleep. The room is dark. Anything even remotely distinguishable from the darkness is only visible by the moonlight coming through my bedroom window. In this frightening void of a room, I am just trying to get to sleep. Somehow I have convinced myself that my blanket will protect me from harm. The naivety of children is a strange and funny thing. I am faced with the dilemma. I know I need to close my eyes in order to fall asleep, but I am also hesitant to close them and let my guard down to the terror lurking just out of my sight. I'm a sitting duck wrapped up in my bed, so when it finally decides to make its move for me, I'm as good as gone. My breathing grows heavier by the minute, and I worry that the loudness of it will jeopardize my position, which causes me to breathe harder. It's the silence of nighttime that makes me feel so vulnerable. But then, out of the silence, emerges the sound of my door handle turning. The door opens at a painfully slow rate, with animalistic sounds bleeding through from the other side. This is it. I'm so dead. Once the door is open wide enough, I see it in its full horror. A velociraptor. Unlike in the movies, it isn't a fake-out. It's the real thing, and I'm lying there in a combination of shock and hopelessness. The raptor is smart and is well aware that I have nothing to do but stand in as the prey in this predator-prey dynamic. It creeps over to me in my bed, its eyes piercing through the darkness and its claws gleaming with reflected moonlight. Standing over me now, it prepares to lunge, and just as it goes for the kill, I wake up in a cold sweat. This was the basis of countless childhood nightmares I had growing up, ever since watching Steven Spielberg's timeless film, Jurassic Park. The amount of sleep lost out of fear of the extinct animals brought back to life in Spielberg's convincing and engaging production. But this movie was not scary like any old horror movie. The scariest part of this thriller movie was that, although being highly exaggerated for dramatic effect, its premise was grounded in scientific theory. Jurassic Park is not fantasy, it is science fiction. Before ever watching the movie, I had an adoration for dinosaurs and learning about paleontology. I owned so many books on dinosaurs, and I could name and draw numerous species. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up. Whenever adults would ask what I want to do when I'm older, and I would respond with that answer, the look of confusion was visible on their faces. That's an awfully big word for a 7-year-old to know, but I insisted. I loved the subject. So when I was made aware of the fact that there was a live-action dinosaur movie, I had to watch it. It was in 2004 when my mom bought a VHS copy of Jurassic Park. It came with a warning from her, though, that the movie might be a bit scary for kids. Warning aside, I popped in the VHS and laid eyes on living dinosaurs for the first time. The previously described nightmares started shortly after and lasted for years. But even though they persisted, that day was not the last time I watched this film. Far from it. In fact, I have probably seen Jurassic Park an estimated 30 to 40 times in my life since that day, more times than I have viewed any other film. Despite the nightmares, despite the fact that my favorite animals to have ever existed were now the ones that I feared the most, I kept going back to Jurassic Park. And I think that is the best testament to the legacy of this film in my life. I loved this film more than any other. I wanted to be Alan Grant, and I took on a love for Steven Spielberg as a creator. But the intrigue didn't stop with the 1993 film. A couple of years later, we found a used VHS copy of The Making of Jurassic Park, a behind-the-scenes documentary about the pre-production, production, and post-production of the film. We bought the tape, and it too I have seen quite a few times. Today, I still own the tapes of both Jurassic Park and The Making of documentary, along with my Blu-ray copy of the film. A couple of years ago, the film was also brought to local theaters in a limited run of showings of classic movies. FLP co-host Marco and I attended, and I am so happy to be able to say that I have seen Jurassic Park on the big screen, despite the film being released 4 years before we were born. When I was a younger viewer, it was the sheer wonder of the dinosaurs and the connection to the characters that drew me to the film. As I got older, on top of that childlike wonder I still get from watching it, it's the astonishing amount of creativity, inventiveness, and technique that went into making Jurassic Park that really started to fascinate me. The massive headway in the fields of special effects, sound design, and set building this movie brought with it is still legendary to this day. The visuals have aged so well for a movie released in 1993, and the sound design is still impeccable and impressively precise. The locales in the movie are gorgeous, and I will forever be a fan of the set design. specifically of the utilitarian and jungle aesthetics in the architecture laid atop the vibrant landscapes. The studio sets were also ambitious, as was the decision to engineer multiple robotic dinosaurs to use in the shooting of the film. And the score is one of John Williams' most impending and beautiful creations. With all of this on top of a screenplay based off of a best-selling story, and a terrific cast under the direction of one of history's most beloved filmmakers, Jurassic Park is, in my eyes, a perfect film. It is my favorite film. One that makes a timeless statement, that stands alone, and that I can watch any day of the week. It's a well-executed, neatly wrapped package of imagination, excitement, and wondrous filmmaking. This was the first movie I was ever really invested in as a child, and although I changed my mind long ago about becoming a paleontologist, maybe this movie subconsciously inspired my career path nevertheless. As a soon-to-be graduating student of filmmaking, I've learned a lot about the craft in the process. I have only grown to love Jurassic Park even more. Perhaps that is the best testament to this film's legacy in my life, to the legacy of any film. I don't know if there will ever be another movie quite like Jurassic Park. With that said, I welcome other perspectives, so now I introduce my co-hosts, Carolina and Marco, to discuss Steven Spielberg's classic.
Guys, we've been killing the intro game lately. Oh my god. And let me tell you something,
It's only going to get better from here.
It's only getting better from here. You don't know what's happening, but there are plans in the works.
How am I going to one-up Dan?
I'm so looking forward to both of your personalized intros.
I need to start planning immediately. That's what I'm doing as soon as we're done recording. But first, I'm so excited to talk about Jurassic Park because I had not seen it in so long. And I was low-key mad that I had to take notes because I just wanted to watch and enjoy.
I know, right? Like, you just want to sit back and watch the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the whole time, I was just like, there's so much to take in with my eyes. I kept pausing if I had longer notes to make because I was like, I don't want to miss anything. I had to rewind a couple times. It's so enjoyable. Like, no part of it is dull. Mm-hmm. I had such a great time.
Yeah, I think this movie, like with all the movies we're going to be talking about in our selection series, which I guess for anyone who doesn't know, these next 3 episodes are going to be each one of us picking a movie that we consider to be one of our favorites. It's just like, it's so good. Like, I don't even know, like there's so much to say, but also nothing to say because like, it's like an amazing movie. Sorry to interrupt, but that's the reason like I didn't bother with a synopsis for this one because like who isn't aware of it's Jurassic Park.
There's an island.
Even if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you're aware with the basic premises. So
absolutely.
I didn't include it.
Yeah, it's great, and I think the thing that really stuck out to me this time, and I'm sure we'll, as we talk about the movie, it'll come up, but I just like, this movie to me is the Goldilocks zone of movies because, like, for anyone who's not aware, in space people's stuff, there's a phrase called the Goldilocks zone, which basically describes like the distance a planet would have to be from its sun to be habitable to humans. And like if you're too far to one side or the other, it would be inhabitable. And this movie has so many places where like it could be bad.
Yeah.
Where it like takes really big swings, but they always like connect and work. And I think that's because, and I guess like this will be part of my questions I have for Dan, but like this is just like Spielberg like truly at the top of his game. Like just the way he reins in this entire movie and makes it all work when there's so many things that could not work is just like a miracle. And that was my biggest takeaway this time. I was just like, wow, like I don't even like the fact that this movie works, but then also the fact that it's amazing is a huge testament to him as a director.
Well, even I don't think I saw the full thing until high school. Like, I definitely didn't see it as a child because I would have been terrified like you did in your description. Like, especially watching it now, I was like, oh, this is a horror movie almost.
Yeah.
Especially after the first intro is over, once you, like, encounter the T-Rex for the first time, you're like, oh, no, this is scary. Like, I forgot, I mean, we'll get into it, but I forgot that the T-Rex just straight up eats the lawyer off the toilet.
Yeah,
and it's on screen. It doesn't cut away.
No.
Yeah. I was like, oh, right, this isn't for children.
Yeah, and not to jump too far ahead, but, well, I guess, do you guys want to start by talking about the horror elements? Because
Sure.
I want to talk about the raptor kitchen scene is still, like, one of the scariest movie scenes, like scarier than scenes that I've seen in really good horror films, just because it's so tense. And it's like, this past rewatch, I think I sort of narrowed in on exactly why it still sticks with me. It's because I don't know what I would have done in that situation.
Yeah.
And that's like, in a horror scene, that is the scariest thing. It's like, if you're not sure you could survive in this situation, if you put yourself in their shoes,
Well, I
that's
feel
what
that
makes
way
it
about
really
like
scary.
everything that's vaguely scary. So,
But it really felt that way for like this scene in particular for me.
well, especially because they foreshadowed it at the beginning when he explained the raptor attack in detail at the excavation site they were at, and so you knew how relentless they were and how tactical and organized, and like that's part of the genius of this film, is that they kept dropping like hints and facts about how smart they are. They've been systematically testing fence failures, and just so then to have it culminate in them having to, and the kids didn't know the knowledge of all that stuff either. It was just kind of for us to know the stakes were so high, but they obviously didn't know what to do about it. And so, I mean, low-key, it's kind of unbelievable that they escaped it, but, I mean, I'll take it. I'd rather that ending than kids being eaten by raptors, so.
That's kind of the old, like, Hitchcock, like, if you have, like, there's a famous thing of Hitchcock talking about suspense, and he's like if people are sitting at a table and a bomb goes off, that's just, like, a brief moment of, like, oh, what the heck? Yeah. But he's like, if you show the audience that there's a bomb under the table and the people sitting around don't know it's there, then you have like tension. And I think it works really well that you have these kids, and obviously like the guy, the little kid, the boy,
Tim.
Tim knows about dinosaurs. The girl doesn't like really fully, because
she's just a hacker.
She's just a hacker, which listen, this movie's not.
I know we've talked about this. That's one.
We'll get into it, but we can save it for the very end.
It was the 90s.
Because I don't want to like get too much into that, because I love this movie. I know. But yeah, I think it throughout the movie we're just doing such a good job of like setting up the raptors as like literally the worst creatures ever, and we see so many different examples of that, like starting with
the final
Grant.
boss.
I mean literally setting up the final boss, and there's that scene at the beginning with like Grant talking to the little kid, which
traumatizing the kid.
I wrote down a note. I was like, more little kids need to be bullied like this nowadays, because just on like a side note, like sometimes I'll just be driving and there'll be little kids on bikes that'll just like give me the finger or something, and I'm like, there is something wrong. Like I think we need more Alan Grants being like, a raptor will cut your stomach open and eat you from the inside while you're still alive. But it does such a good job of that. And then even like later when they get to the lab and he finds out like they've been breeding raptors, and like just the way Spielberg even shoots that, of like you get this scene of like the camera coming around and like right on Grant's face, and he's like, you've been breeding raptors, and it's just like,
are you guys fucking insane?
Yeah, are you guys fucking and then like the I guess it's kind of funny, but like the token Australian like outdoorsman, I don't know, who's
Muldoon,
who's also obsessed with raptors, which is, I just like, it's does such a good job of setting them up as the big bad of the movie.
Yeah, and of course the like the extremely well executed like intro scene of caging the raptor. Sort of like it's perfect, because for anyone who's unfamiliar with the story, it's like, it's very intriguing from the get-go, but it also, like you said, Marco, it sets them up as like, they're not the antagonist of the movie. I think most people would say John Hammond is.
Sure.
But like in terms of the dinosaur characters, I guess we'll call them, they're sort of like the antagonist to what ends up being the Tyrannosaur's protagonist, sort of.
Yeah.
By that end scene. So there's sort of, it's cool because the human characters have protagonist and antagonist characters, and then also in like the dinosaur section, like they also sort of have
it's like a dinosaur subplot.
yeah basically.
And to your like what Carol was saying earlier, I think part of the reason that it's so scary too, and Dan, you brought this up too in your intro, is just like the fact that this is all like relatively scientifically accurate.
And people are trying to make this happen still, even though there have been 5 movies saying why it's
Yeah.
a horrible fucking idea.
Yeah, and I think that even makes it scarier. And I think like one of the notes I took when I was watching it is just how comforting it was that like Dr. Grant and Sattler both actually seem like they are intellectuals in their field and know what they're talking about. And they're not just like generic hero characters. Like they really actually talk about a lot of the like science and stuff in a way that makes everything feel a bit scarier when everything goes to shit later in the movie.
Well,
One of my favorite scenes is that dinner scene where it's just them having a discussion, and it's very
I was
like,
gonna
it's
say,
laying
can
all
we
the facts
talk
out on the
about that
table.
for 30 minutes at some point?
Yes, because we
Well,
also
go ahead. Like, it's a great scene.
we also just need to talk about the fact that, at least for me, this is my favorite Jeff Goldblum performance.
Oh,
in
I was
anything.
gonna say, can we appreciate that Jeff Goldblum is possibly one of the greatest performers ever? Even just for this role alone.
But also,
He's
I feel
so
like this
good.
role is kind of what he became. Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
like,
I
his
mean, it's
personality
basically
came
Jeff
first, or he
Goldblum.
played this and was like, oh
It's
no,
the
this
chicken
is
and the
cooler.
egg paradox.
Yeah.
I have a-
He gives off the vibe now of this chaos
Yeah.
theorist.
This is all he does ever with everything. Here's my thing for why I think it's just him, because one, and we can maybe talk about this a little bit, but like I actually also, like Carol, didn't see this movie as like a young kid. My first experience with Jurassic Park was actually reading the book that it's based on, because I was really into like sci-fi books, and then would see the movie later after that. But in the book, this character is way more like of an actual just mathematician person.
He's a lot more toned down.
Yeah, he's not like the weird, quirky Jeff Goldblum. But then the other reason is just like seeing him in interviews and stuff. I don't know. I mean, and I guess interviews could also be him doing a performance, but like, I mean, he is just this person. Conan O'Brien does a podcast called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and it's really good, and I listened to it. And Jeff Goldblum was on in like the first season. And how that podcast is introed is they give them like a script. So it'll say like, hi, my name is whatever, like whatever your name is, and I feel, and then you give like a 1-word answer about being Conan O'Brien's friend. So it'll be like, hi, my name is Will Ferrell, and I feel great about, or I feel worried, or whatever. Like, but when they got to the Jeff Goldblum episode, he goes, hi, my name is Jeff Goldblum, and I feel, well, how do I feel? Well, some days I feel like this. And he goes on for like a minute, and then it's like silence, and then you just hear Conan go, Jeff, most people answered with 1 word. And it's just, the whole interview is just Conan desperately trying to like have a conversation.
To rein him
Yeah,
in.
and he's just being an insane person. So I do think it's just him. But
He's great. He also has like a jazz career.
no, he doesn't. Does he really?
He does.
Does he sing? Does
He's a
he
musician.
Play? Okay.
I think he sings a little bit.
Wow.
I know he's at least a jazz musician.
Okay, Jeff, go off.
Also, he's married to a contortionist, which is just like the most Jeff Goldblum thing. Like, who else do you know that's married to a contortionist of all things?
How did
like,
they meet?
I don't know.
That's so funny. Oh my god. Has he also had like 10 wives like this character?
I don't think so. I think he's literally just been married to this one person, which is even funnier.
Yeah, good for him. Oh my god. Okay, but I'm not done talking about the horror yet, because
Yeah,
those
go.
are
Yeah.
some of the most
Go ahead.
iconic scenes. Like, I've seen them hundreds of times, despite the fact that I've seen the movie, you know, I think maybe 3 times, maybe even twice. I feel like I saw parts of it growing up, but I think I might have seen the full thing twice. But yeah, even the intro to the T-Rex, when it just shows the cups of water in the car
Classic.
shaking, so good. Like this.
I have a fact about that later.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of brought it up because I hoped you had some background. But yeah, no, it was so good. And even, especially, I found it so fascinating having the perspective from the 2 cars. Because, like, the one car noticed the goat was gone first, you know? And then the other car somehow didn't really notice. And then when the fence was torn down, one car saw it, the other didn't. And I just loved seeing it from those 2 perspectives and how they both reacted so differently. The one guy ran away like a dummy, but also, and I guess also having the one car with all the knowledge about the dinosaurs and the other one being clueless and helpless. Just so genius.
I also love, like, speaking of the goat in specific, I took a note on this because I just thought it was so brilliantly done. It's such a, like, a subtle thing, But earlier in the movie, when they're going on the ride, like, they put the goat down and the T-Rex doesn't come out to eat it. And at the time, it's played off like this big joke about how, like, they're not actually seeing any dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But then when you get to that scene, it serves as such a good, like, oh fuck moment when the cars are stopped. And it's like, well, where are they stopped? And then the first thing they cut to is the goat. And it's such, like, a subliminal thing where as an audience member you're just like, god damn it, like they're next to the T-Rex
and you know what's gonna happen.
It's so brilliantly done, and like you never even cue into it, but it's just like, it's so perfect.
Yeah, and aside from that intro scene where we don't even see it in full, but we see the velociraptor like in the cage, just like its face, that T-Rex scene is like the first like carnivore dinosaur scene, really, where we see like a full dinosaur in like a horror aspect,
right?
Because besides that, you've only seen like vegetarians and like how beautiful they are.
Yeah.
And that's another point that I want to bring up is I love that this movie, although showing both the vegetarians and carnivores and how like scary they can be, it frames them in like they're just animals.
Yeah.
This isn't a monster movie. It's, you feel bad for them for being brought to life against their will, like cloned against their will and caged like zoo animals.
Yeah.
It's just in the context of dinosaurs now. It's like when you go to a zoo and you feel bad for the animals in there. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I like that it took that perspective,
for sure,
rather than just being a generic monster movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they could have done, you know, I also do appreciate the fact that even in the science of it, of the like, they could have crossed them with something else, you know, and created some like
the new
fucked up
Jurassic
like
films.
the new Jurassic movies. And I appreciate the fact that it was like, no, we picked something that we thought was the closest, which then ends up being again another brilliant
detriment
setup.
So good.
Like, it's so, because you don't even think about it when they're going through the tour and they're like, yeah, we used some like frog DNA, and then when it turns out that they've been reproducing, it's like, well, some like frogs can actually change sex if they're in like a all one sex environment. And I was like, that's so
it's so
good.
perfect, because it's almost like evolution is getting back at them, but not evolution that takes millions of years to take place. It's like literally the frogs switching sex thing. It's like it represents evolution getting its revenge on them.
Well, and also,
it's great. It's so good.
Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. You know what I mean? Such a good quote from this movie, but it's like, I love that. Yeah,
there
it's
are
so
so
awesome.
many good quotes from this movie.
I know.
had to make so many notes of them. Also, this movie is hilarious. There are
Yeah.
so many one-liners, but I find that almost in a lot of the scenes, the dialogue is so fast-paced, and because it's not meant to be a comedy, they don't really take those beats for you to, like, appreciate the joke or have a laugh track or whatever. And so you kind of have to, like, pay attention to get some of the jokes, because it, like, flies right by. I replayed a whole scene just because I was like, wait, this is funny. I need to write down what they said.
Which scene was it?
It was when Hammond went to the site, like in the helicopter, and they were talking as he was like pouring champagne.
Yeah.
There were so many quirky little one-liners there. It was so good.
I also love how like it's such a John Hammond like asshole CEO thing to show up at a paleontological dig that he sponsors in a helicopter, covering all of the dig sites in dirt. Like he has no fucking idea. That was such a good like character setup moment for him.
Something I want to say specifically about that scene, and I mean, this maybe goes without saying, and maybe it's just for all Spielberg movies, but I just feel like Spielberg does such a good job with character introductions in all his movies, and not just necessarily in what's happening in the scene, but even that the way like everything's shot. And coming off of the movies we were talking about, and how like ridiculous some of the character introductions in those are. Like, I really appreciate the fact that like the first time you see John Hammond, he's just like in this like he's just in the fridge like looking for champagne because he's already trying to celebrate something, and it's like, oh, that makes like so much sense like for what his character is and like what we see to happen later in the movie. But same with like Grant and like everyone in the movie. I feel like the lawyer, his first scene is just like awkwardly standing on a raft while it gets like cold.
Oh my God, that was so ridiculous.
So funny. And I also I like his suit, like he looks like he's straight out of Frasier. Like it is the most 90s suit. But yeah, all the character introductions are like so strongly done in that scene you're talking about in particular. But actually, so this kind of leads into a question that I have for you, Dan, as the resident expert on this movie. And I don't know if it's like ever straight up addressed in the behind the scenes or not, but I think biggest takeaway I had this time around was like how insane it was to have a movie that from scene to scene is sometimes a horror movie, but also sometimes like comedy, like actual just straight up comedy. And I have no idea like what the process is in balancing those two tones, and if they didn't address it, like what are your thoughts on having seen this movie so many times on like how they pull that off successfully?
So yeah, I'll just start by saying I don't think I said it on the recording yet, but I did rewatch the making of for this viewing. So a lot of stuff I'll be referencing from that, but that is not, it's not really something that they go into. The documentary it's largely based off of like the technological process, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Gotcha.
But to answer that question, I feel like that's just an inherent Spielberg thing. Like for me, he's my favorite director. So like this is someone that I'm in love with the tone that he hits with each of his films. So for me personally, it's always like it's a fine balance between the frightening things but also the levity, and I think it's necessary in any horror film really. You don't want it to be like extremely depressing that you walk out and you feel like, you know, you're in a void.
Yeah.
You want to have fun with it. This isn't a horror movie either. It's like I'd call it an adventure thriller movie, I guess. Yeah. Sci-fi also, but yeah. Like I said in the intro too, it's not just the scary elements that make it so memorable. It's the wondrous feeling you get from it, and all of these sort of come together for me for this like magical movie experience that it hits the perfect tone.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's this movie is like 4 different genres like all put together, and it excels at like all of them and just becomes this like perfect movie. It's so awesome. I wish there was more movies like this, because it's just like you're saying. So like I think back to even like modern horror movies that I do like, and a lot of them are just so like dreadful that I have no, even though they're incredibly well made, like I'm thinking of like especially Ari Aster movies. It's like they're like the 2 of his that I've seen are like so well made, but I like don't want to go back because I just felt like shit after watching them. Whereas with this,
also them both multiple times.
Oh god.
And a pitfall of like, I find a lot of modern horror movies go for shock value way too much, which can be like, it can be effective, but it's also like that's easy. Like you can write just anything shocking or disgusting and get and elicit a reaction from your audience, but it doesn't make it like clever, you know, necessarily.
Yeah, that's interesting. That does make sense.
And I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I've been watching bad movies lately, but I feel like it's just so rare for it, like just the setup to be so smart and methodical, and just, I mean, we've already talked about it, but just everything was such a good payoff, and it just feels so good to watch. Like it's kind of nice that nothing's a surprise. Like it's just and like, this is genius.
Think about like the percentage of the screen time that you actually see dinosaurs. It's less than you would probably expect, but you don't care because like it gets you invested in the human characters and just the effective setup. Like basically the entire film before that first T-Rex sequence is like so much excellent setup. Yeah. And it actually gets you to react when it when the scary stuff does finally start happening.
Absolutely. And I also think, I mean, talking about Spielberg again, like what's crazy to me too is, and maybe this is just a me thing, but like everyone always talks about like how Spielberg is pretty much responsible, I guess also with Lucas, but like for the popcorn movie, like the blockbuster, and they always reference Jaws as like that thing for him, like Jaws and Jurassic Park as his 2 big blockbusters. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, holy shit, those movies came out like 20 years apart. Like Steven Spielberg made Jaws like 20 years, because Jaws came out in the 70s and this movie came out in what, 94?
93, and Jaws was like 75, I think.
So it's like almost
20 years different.
Almost 20 years apart. And yeah, but I also think, to your point, like what you're talking about, like what I think works so well about the use of the dinosaurs is partially a lesson learned from Jaws, which is like the less that you use them and you're able to like build them up, the scarier it ends up being. But then also you rely less on things that will not stand the test of time. Because, I mean, how many movies even from like, you know, if I watch a movie now from like 2008 that's like heavily reliant on CG, it looks like shit.
Yeah.
Like it really does look like shit. You know what I mean? You just can't get away from that. And like this
Yeah.
movie looks better than all those movies, and it's because they're so meticulous about when to use the effects, and then like they also do this is like that sweet spot of like, yeah, we have CG, but like we're not just gonna 100% CG everything. Like we're gonna combine it with other types of visual effects, and we're gonna really like try to create a amazing finished product. Which I think they succeed at. There's literally only one scene in this movie where I'm like, that those effects don't look amazing.
When?
But the rest of the movie, sorry?
When?
Unfortunately, it's literally it's the first time you see the dinosaurs. It's just that the first scene where the Brachiosaurus or whatever.
When it's just the one, or when it pans out to like all of them?
When it's all like just that whole sequence, and I think the biggest thing is because I think that scene. And Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's 100% CG. I don't know if they used any animatronics.
Yeah, it is, and it's also like broad daylight.
That's the thing.
So that's gonna be the harshest.
Yeah, it's all CG. It's broad daylight. There's nothing obscuring anything. So that's the one that I think. Not that it looks bad. I still think it looks better than most modern, like not necessarily modern, but like other movies that came out more recently than it. But compared to everything else, like everything else I think is totally seamless. Like I can't tell if it's animatronic or CG. It just looks perfect.
Yeah. And man, some of those robotics, some of those animatronics are still like breathtaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this leads into one of my first questions, because I didn't do any research or watch any behind the scenes because I knew I had an expert. And it saved me some work, so thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that it's part CG but part like actual animatronic robots they built. So like, what was that whole process like? Which ones did they build? They were so realistic for the time.
Yeah, it's so cool. So this is something that the documentary goes very in depth with.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So if you guys didn't know, it's well, you might have seen in the credits, it's Stan Winston and his team behind the animatronics. So like classic, you know, they're in really good hands. But basically for the full sized, they mentioned that they did a few. So obviously they made a full size Tyrannosaurus Rex robotic or animatronic.
That's
they did.
insane.
Yeah.
I know.
Like that
looks so
alone
good.
is huge.
Yeah, even if they would have just done that, but they also did the Velociraptors. The Dilophosaurus was obviously an animatronic.
Also, when we first saw the Dilophosaurus sign, I read it as Dilphosaurus, and I was like, I didn't know a Dilphosaurus existed.
Dilphosaurus.
Thankfully, they said it out loud immediately after, because I would have fully thought for the full movie it was a Dilphosaurus. But continue, sorry.
I've never made that mistake. That's funny.
Can't say I have either.
I never learned my dinosaurs, guys. I don't know what to tell you.
But the other one, the last one that I was thinking of was the Triceratops,
Nice.
the sick Triceratops, and like how they made it like breathe, and they made like the eyes move and everything, and the mouth, the tongue and everything. But I think in my opinion, the coolest innovation in terms of like the robotics team was that they hired like a claymation artist for part of this film, because they're like, obviously aside from the full scale animatronics, there are also miniatures, and like, you know, lots of films use miniatures for special effects and stuff. So this film did that too. But they hired a claymation artist for a lot of the animation, I'll just call it. And it was really cool because he mentioned in the documentary that he was so used to when you have a new frame in a claymation animation, you just go in by hand and move the figures by hand, like directly. You have that direct manual access. But he was very new to the digital animation process, and it's just like sitting at a keyboard hitting a bunch of keys. So they spearheaded this thing where they set up a little animatronic, like a miniature animatronic, that the claymation artist could move, and it would correspond with the digital image on screen. So he could bypass the keyboard and traditionally change like the pose frame to frame, but it would have the effect of digital animation.
That's awesome.
That was so fascinating, I think.
Yeah, that's so cool. How did they come up with that? I don't understand.
Yeah, and it's stuff like this, like that the movie like just spearheaded for the industry for the years to come. And this is in the 90s.
Yeah, that's
cool.
also something that like kept sitting with me. I was like, this movie came out so long ago, but it's so modern and timeless, and it doesn't it doesn't seem old. Like, not just, like, obviously because of the special effects as well, like, because they were done so well. But, I don't know. I mean, it probably helps that the setting is, like, a fictional place, too. So you're not, like, comparing it to, like, the New York of today, like, movies set in, like, an old New York. But, yeah, it holds up so well.
I also find it either ironic or intentionally funny that Grant's first line is, "I hate computers," considering how this film, like, revolutionized, like, the digital filmmaking technology aspects.
Well,
and also
computers also fuck him over at the end, so he was right.
The thing. Going back to character introductions, like, again, you have this old school paleontologist, and and his whole thing is like, this is fucked up, and then it ends up being fucked up because of technology, which is, like, again, just awesome. I love stuff like that. The only thing about this movie that really, like, I think dates it is probably just the fashion, but, like, there's nothing you can do about that.
And the fashion's coming back around.
That's the thing, though. I was gonna
fashion
say, like,
is never.
I'm wearing
it
full
never stays in
jean
one
because of
spot.
Laura Dern today. I'll post a pic later.
I was crushing hard on Ellie Sattler.
Yeah,
as a kid,
she's awesome.
I mean, me too. Laura Dern is fantastic.
What I love, too, about the cast in this is that none of these people, I think, at the time were necessarily, like, big movie stars. Like, we know them all now. And, like, I think Laura Dern's even, like, won an Oscar now. Like, she's great. But, like, I don't think she was the Laura Dern that she is now at the time. And I don't think Jeff Goldblum was. And I know definitely Grant, what's his name? I forget the actor's name now.
Sam Neill.
I don't think he was...
I think the only one really that was Richard Attenborough.
Yeah.
And he has, like, not a cameo, but one of the smallest roles. Mm-hmm. But they actually talk about that in the documentary, and Spielberg, like, literally says he wanted to go for like, smaller scale actor. He didn't want to cast, like, movie stars.
Right.
He wanted to cast real actors. So you're right on the nose.
Well, and I feel like every time a movie does that, it's always for the better.
Oh, yeah.
And not to say that, like, a movie, that would be kind of like a silly paradox. Like, if every movie only cast new people, then there would be no movie stars ever. But, like, I just love when
it's less distracting.
Yeah, when you're doing something like this high concept and inventive, it is a little bit less distracting to just put really good actors in roles, and then, you're just fully immersed instead of being like, that's whoever, like, that I know doing the thing. It's great. Also, surprise Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. I literally always forget he's in this movie until he shows up, and then I'm like, oh yeah, he's in this movie.
And Wayne Knight, who's Newman on Seinfeld.
Yes.
That was a question I had
Perfectly
for you.
cast.
Do you?
Dennis.
Was he must have only been cast in this movie because of Seinfeld, right? Like, is there any chance that
he must have been, because Seinfeld was, like, starting to be, like, in its prime.
Yeah.
I think around that time it was, like, mid-90s, where it's like it started to get, legendary.
Even his introduction was perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's so good. Like, yeah, he has that funny scene at the diner with Dodgson.
Yeah.
Which is, like, a classic now, where he's like, Dodgson, no one cares. But then what's really cool is then when they reveal him as a worker in the computer room.
Yes.
And it's like for someone seeing this movie for the first time, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So the saboteur is someone working in the park. That's not going to end well.
No.
It's just stuff like, it's reveals like that I find very effective.
Yeah, it's just, like, again, like, expert filmmaking on their part to pull that off. Yeah, it's just great. He's great in it, and Samuel Jackson's great. Even though something I always love when Samuel Jackson's, like, playing against type, because he so often is just, like, the crazy angry person, which is great. Like, don't get me wrong, I love him for that, but to have him in this movie just be, like, a computer nerd who's just kind of, like, frustrated at the whole thing, it's fun. It's fun to see a performance like that. I think, the whole cast is great. And also, fun fact that I totally forgot until I was watching this movie and the two kids showed up, is that the little boy in this movie, Tim, right? The actor who plays him is in The Social Network.
He is?
He plays one of Mark Zuckerberg's friends that in real life, like, was more important in the creation of Facebook than he really, like, is in the movie. Like, in the movie, he just kind of has, like, a small role, and he's in some of the scenes. Yeah, but it's the same guy. It's the kid from Jurassic Park. And apparently on the set of that movie, they kept always being like, "Oh, wait a minute, you were fucking in Jurassic Park. Like, tell us stories about Jurassic Park. That's awesome."
I wonder what he did in between
Wow,
all that.
I'll have to look into that later.
He's like Jesus, like
Big
we talked
gap.
about last week. He just was a kid and then one day showed up as a 30-year-old.
There's no stories.
There's no stories
between.
in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just didn't exist.
Good for him. Oh
Yeah.
my god. Yeah, even it's very hit or miss having kids be in films. I know we talked about this when we did School of Rock, but it can
Oh, yeah.
really make or break a movie. And like these guys did a good job. But I do have a question,
Yeah.
speaking of children. The kid that they freaked out at the dig site, where did he come from? Why was he there?
Okay, so that's a good question. I can't confirm, but this is how I see it. So it looks like Grant and Ellie are like sort of leading like a student dig where it's like university students studying paleontology would sit in, and maybe like one of them had a kid or something, so they had to bring them along. You're totally right where it's like, if you think about it too much, it's like, why is there a kid there in the middle of the desert where like it's very harsh conditions? And yeah, but that's sort of what I get from it, because it looks like there's a lot of university students there.
I guess that would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I was like, they could have taken like a sentence to explain that, and I wouldn't have had to
Yeah,
question
maybe it's a
it.
deleted scene or something.
Yeah, true.
To your point, Carol, I think both the kid performers in this are good. Although, I think my biggest problem with the movie is just that they give the like young boy way more to do than the young girl. Like every plot that the young girl is involved in is just very kind of on the nose and silly. She just kind of ends up being a very silly character. Which, I mean, whatever. I understand, like, if kids are going to be watching this movie, they, like, need other kids to, like, relate to, and also seeing kids in danger. And also, I understand that, yes, like, one of the kids should probably be more knowledgeable on the subject and the other one shouldn't. I get all that, but her character does come across as a little silly. Like, her two biggest contributions to the movie, outside of almost getting them killed when the T-Rex shows up by, like, flashing the light.
Oh my god.
I was, like, furious watching that this time around.
Me too.
Because the kid is like, turn off the fucking light, and she's just like, what? Like even if you don't know that the T-Rex is like photosensitive, why would you flash the light at it? Like, it just makes no sense to me. A positive though about that scene I want to say, because we're talking about how good the visual effects are, when like her face is in the window and then the T-Rex's face also comes in the window.
Yes.
And like their faces are, first of all, very well shot. Second of all, you can see the T-Rex's eye like dilate and then like go back.
Whoa.
Like, it literally, the pupil is like that, like perfectly created, and it's just like I've never noticed that before until this time, and it's just so like, holy shit. I like the level of detail there to actually have the eye dilate. I was like, god damn, what a good movie, what a great movie.
And well, I was trying to figure out if that was CGI or if that was something practical. And even if it was CGI, that looked really good.
Yeah.
For the year.
I don't know.
And if it wasn't, I mean, good on them for somehow rigging an animatronic to show that.
It's awesome. Yeah, but no, so like after that scene, the only other two things that the character really contributes is, one, she's a vegetarian, and then they meet vegetarian dinosaurs, and then they sneeze on her. And then two, she is a hacker who knows computers, and then uses a Unix system at the end. And it's just like, you know, like, I haven't used the term in a while, but it's shenanigans. Like, all of this is just shenanigans, where it's just like stuff is happening and it's kind of silly. It's supposed to be maybe funny, but also like I don't know. I don't know. I just wish, like, I so wish that the vegetarian sneezing on her scene wasn't in the movie, and I so wish that, like, I'm fine with the.
Also, I
like
that we're calling them vegetarians and not herbivores.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they call it, but that's, like, the whole point of, like...
It's a choice.
Because she has to learn to, like dinosaurs. You know what I mean? That's her arc, is she's like, there's, like, some dinosaurs...
It's a cow.
Yeah, there's some that are like me, so I can relate to it personally, because we both eat vegetables. That's her arc in this movie. But, I'm even okay with the idea that, like, to save the day, one of the kids needs to, like, use new technology or whatever, like, contrasted to Grant and, like, how much he hates computers. Totally fine with that. I have no problem with that. but it's just the really awkward setup payoff of I'm a hacker, and then this is the Unix system, and then we're just watching her like move across this screen. I was kind of like, it's not. It's probably like the only thing in this movie that's not perfect. It's just that where I'm like, I wish it was a little bit better.
Fair.
But what I do like about that is, in contrast with Hammond setting all this technology up to automate the park and being clueless about it, it's a kid who actually knows about the technology, using it, saving the day with it.
Yeah, like I said, I dig the whole premise of it. I think is great. It's just like there's something about the way that it's done. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's so dramatically done or whatever, or maybe because the line about her being a hacker was just so like.
It's sort of a one-off.
Yeah.
I'll give that to you totally 100%. And I think now's a good time to mention, I recognize this isn't an objectively perfect movie. When I said it was a perfect movie in my intro, it's like my perfect movie, you know. And
but also
I'm
in
sure
general,
we'll
it
like
is pretty close.
No, I mean it legit like
it's awesome.
This is legitimately the only thing I can think of that I would actually like genuinely criticize. Like it's pretty close to being like as perfect of a movie as any movie could be. But it's Dan, you were just talking about how like the over-reliance on automation and like how that's such a big plot in this movie. I have to tell you guys, this is my first time seeing this movie as a fully fledged electrical automation engineer, and the anxiety I was having when everything started failing and they couldn't figure out how to fix it and like the power shut off.
It's scary.
I was just imagining myself being Samuel L. Jackson, having a boss be like, "Hey, fix this," and he's like, "I fucking don't know what's happening, man." Like, what? We were over, or like, there's that other great, like, funny throwaway line when the lights aren't working, and he's like, "All right, great, like, problem number 150, we have to troubleshoot today," and it's just like, it's so true. It's so true to life. I just want you guys to know, like, that is so true to life. And
do you also have a dentist in the office?
Yes.
Also, before I forget, a while back we were talking about the vibrating water cup scene.
Yes.
And I said I have a fun fact. I want to mention that before I forget to bring it up.
Please.
So this is another thing they talk about in the documentary, and apparently for no reason, like, they were having a lot of trouble getting that effect.
Oh.
Like it wasn't as easy as you might think, I guess.
Really?
Yeah. So what they ended up doing was the sound designer ended up like wiring a guitar string under the car dashboard.
Stop it.
And then for that shot, they would have someone on the ground plucking it, and it would vibrate through the dashboard and make the rings in the cup.
That's so
and it's
fun.
like inventive things like that in filmmaking is what makes, like, I feel like it's half the fun, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it might give you, you know, you might have like a head of gray hair by the end of the project, but it's the troubleshooting stuff like that I'm sort of really looking forward to. Almost.
Yeah.
In a masochistic way.
No, 100%. I know what you mean.
Yeah, like having to figure things out on the fly, and when that works and works well, it's just like the best feeling.
Okay, and also now that we're talking about behind the scenes stuff, before I forget, I had a question. What was filmed on location? What was a set? And like, where was the location?
So the only location was in, well, not the only. There was that like scene with Nedry in the diner, but like the main location was in Hawaii.
Oh, fun.
I think it was Kauai.
Vacation.
I think it's called. Yeah, and it's beautiful, obviously.
Yeah.
And most of the location stuff was shot there, but they recreated the entire that stretch of Tyrannosaur paddock where the cars are stopped on a sound stage, which is impressive.
Damn.
And they had like a rain machine for when it rains.
Yeah.
I think the raptor cage was a set that was built on location in Hawaii. A lot of it.
Wow.
And also like they built the visitor center.
Yeah.
Like just a whole building as a set. It's so
In Hawaii or on a soundstage?
I think that one was on location.
Whoa.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, it must have been because it's like it's out there.
Yeah.
Damn.
It was surrounded by trees.
That would have been a really big soundstage. I'm pretty sure that was also on location.
That's insane.
Dan, going back to the behind the scenes of the effect with the cup with the Tyrannosaurus stomping, was there like so that scene or that effect ends up being used again, like about like whatever 20 minutes later when Jeff Goldblum is sitting at the on the back of the car when Dr. Sattler shows up and you see it in the puddle this time instead of in the cup. Was that like did they have to do the same thing to get that effect the second time? Like, do you know? Like, how did they?
I actually don't know. They didn't talk about that, and I didn't think about that until you just brought that up, because that's like the same problem but on a much larger
Yeah,
scale.
it's like, hey, remember that thing we did that we almost didn't get to work? Fuck it, let's just do it again, but even harder this time.
I don't know. Maybe that would have been easier to just make like a giant collision to make it happen, where you couldn't have done that in the car because
Maybe.
the camera would have been too shaky. So maybe having like a tripod shot outside, it would have been sturdy and they would have been able to do it traditionally. But they don't talk about that. That's a good question.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd just be curious to know. I also just love the fact that they were like, oh man, that's so cool, let's just do it again. Like, let's just do it twice in this movie, because it is, and like, it never bothers me that they're doing it again. I'm always like, yeah, T-Rex is coming. Like, it's just such a cool effect. Why would you not do it?
Yeah, and going back to talking about setting up the first appearance of the T-Rex, and in that, like, basically the second half of the movie is all execution on the setup.
Yeah.
I also want to bring up, I love, on that note of the setup, the whole time the tourists are taking the tour and you don't see the dinosaurs, well, you don't see most of the dinosaurs, they almost act as like a myth, like, are they even here? And then when it's finally, when you see the T-Rex breaking loose, when you see the raptors, it's like, oh, they're here, and they're very real.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're like frighteningly real, and that really plays into the horror element, I think.
Well, also
Yeah, for
just
sure.
I found that I also really appreciated how real everyone's reaction was to it, even how the scientists, I guess specifically, what was the dude scientist's name again? Grant, yes, Dr. Grant. When he first got there, he was the one who was very much like, this is insane. Like, I just love being able to see that they're in herds. Like, he was completely awestruck and loved the science aspect of it. And then at that table scene that we will discuss because I love it, he was like, oh no, like, yeah, it's cool, but this was not a good idea. Like, this shouldn't happen. And I love that you, like, I know that Hammond thought he would be all for it, but also I was exactly of the same mind until directly questioned, and he's like, no, like, this was not a good idea and probably not safe and will probably not end well. And I just loved that kind of slow transition and him kind of getting over his childlike wonder and just like the science of it to then realize what it actually means.
Yeah, it's like once the initial awe dies off,
Yeah.
you realize how bad of an idea. Like, Malcolm was the same way, and he was the biggest. He came down the hardest out of all of them, I think, at the dinner scene.
I think
but
Malcolm
even he
also
was,
had
like, astonished.
less excitement from the, like, he was
Yeah.
like awestruck obviously, but I don't think he was ever really like, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, not like the childlike
yeah.
bewilderment, you know. But
Yeah. I love all that stuff with, like, the whole group of them, like, talking about stuff before, like, even just, oh my god, I love the presentation. Like, the ride.
oh yeah, the Mr. DNA.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
it's so funny when, like, the
With all the
Hammond on the
clones.
screen just walks up and they're just like, hey.
Yeah, it's funny to see, like, they made this, like, shitty animation in a movie that has, like, it had excellent animation. Like, they purposely dialed back the quality for something like
Every
that.
time I see Mr. Paperclip, I just think of the Microsoft Paperclip
Yeah.
guy. You know, that's always like, can I help you with anything? Like,
Mr.
or
DNA,
Mr.
yeah.
DNA. Yeah. Oh my god, that's always the only thing I think of, and it's so funny. It's so good.
And I like when the Hammond on screen is like, "Hello, John, how are you?" And it's like,
Oh, I have
and
lines.
the real Hammond's like, "Oh yeah, I have lines," and then the one on screen is like, "Well, fine, I guess." He just keeps going with the conversation.
It's so funny.
So ill prepared.
But also
Oh my
just in
God.
general, like, every museum has that little theater that has
Yes.
videos. I just loved how true to life it was.
that's
like, of
that's what makes
course.
it so funny. Yeah.
He's just trying to make this traditional theme park out of a horrible idea.
And I also love how once they get to the point where they're like at the lab, and then like Sattler and Grant and Malcolm are like, hey, can we fucking get off this thing, go see it? They're like, no, you can see it after. And they're like, nah. And they just like lift up the rails and
Yeah.
leave. And the lawyer's like, oh my god, I don't think they should be able to do that. And the lawyer's just being a freaking jerk and he's freaking out. It's just so funny. It's so good. All this stuff is just hilarious. I love it.
It is so
Yeah, I also love. I mean, and this is credit to the book because this is like directly from the book. But I love the idea of mining for prehistoric amber,
Yeah.
finding mosquitoes in it, and then extracting the DNA to like
Yeah.
try just to get like a drop of dinosaur blood, and then like we talked about filling the gaps with frog DNA, and you don't know that's going to be a setup for later. It's just like, oh, that's a feasible reason why this is actually working.
Also,
So,
I didn't
but
know
then-
fossilized tree sap was amber, so I learned something from this film.
Yeah.
I used to think amber was like a rock.
Yeah, I thought it was just like a natural
something.
mineral, which I guess, like, I don't know, once it's fossilized, it's kind of that. I don't know. I
Yeah.
lost all my geology knowledge. It's been too long.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I remember reading that in the book for the first time and being like, oh, that is
Genius.
so clever. Like, that is just so freaking, like, hats off to you for thinking of something, like, that clever. Because they could have just, they didn't even need to explain it. You know what I mean? Like, in another movie, they would have just been like, yep, we figured out how to, we studied stuff and figured out how to bring back dinosaurs. But it's like,
Yeah.
I love that they go to that length. Because it makes it feel scarier because it is, like, actually based in science. Although, I have a fun fact for you guys. The type of mosquito that they show in the amber actually doesn't suck blood. It's the only mosquito species that doesn't suck blood. But because it, like, looked really, like, fun and dynamic, like, that was the one that they chose to put in the movie. But, yeah, it doesn't suck blood in real life. But it's just, like, a fun, silly fact.
But even the setup for
Interesting.
the mosquito in amber was so good, where like the lawyer was introduced at this amber mine, and you saw them freaking out over like a bug in the amber too, was so good. Because it's like, I even had a note earlier and I'm like, I remember that this was somehow tied to how they got the dinosaurs to come back, but I don't exactly remember how. And it's just so rewarding to then be like, yeah, that's why he has an entire mine in this other country for the dinosaurs.
Yeah, and it's really cool in the book. Like I've mentioned before, I think I mentioned before, I haven't actually fully read the book, but like I've read the first bit of it, and it's cool. In the book they talk about like how mysterious it is that John Hammond owns like an island in Costa Rica and like a bunch of amber mines, which seems random, but then like with the whole like his ties with InGen, which is the corporation, they're trying to piece together what he's plotting, and it's very intriguing the way it's done in the book. They don't really, obviously there's not time to go into that in the movie, but I think that's cool.
I do have a question for you, Dan, because I think this is probably one of the best adaptations I've ever seen of a novel, like, put to screen, to the point where I think it even just, like, surpasses, as much as I love the novel, I think it surpasses it. And so I don't know if in any of the production stuff or behind the scenes they talk about the process of, like, how Spielberg came to be the director of this, and then also, like, how Crichton ended up staying on as a, like, writer, a screenwriter. Because most of the time when you're adapting a novel, they don't bring on the novelist to partially write the screenplay. They'll just like hire someone else to write the screenplay based on the book. But Crichton has a co-writing credit on this movie.
Yeah.
So do you know anything about like how that came to be?
So they briefly talk about, Spielberg mentions he was friends with Crichton before he even wrote Jurassic, or I should say before he even finished Jurassic Park.
Ah, okay.
And he was like working on adapting another one of his works, I think, which is not nearly as popular, but they were just talking, and he was like, so tell me what you're working on. And he starts talking about Jurassic Park, and it fascinates Steven Spielberg to the point where like he says he basically gets the entire story out of him. Like he keeps asking questions, and then he's like, eventually it got to the point where he wanted to adapt it into a film. And then I didn't even notice until recently that Michael Crichton has the main screenwriting credit, which is like awesome. I think that's a huge reason that it was adapted so well. Yeah. Because I was looking into David Coep is the other screenwriter, and he hasn't had a whole lot of other great scripts. So I've always wondered like, why did this one work so well? But then realizing that the other screenwriter was the writer of the book, that probably contributed a lot. But yeah, they don't really talk about why exactly he wanted to screenwrite. I would just assume it's because he was very passionate about the book, and he didn't want to trust it in someone else's hands entirely, even though it's a Spielberg project, and he would have he trusted him, but he wanted to pen it himself.
I kind of love that they were friends though, and that it came about before it was even finished, and just through a conversation, he was like, yeah, let's make a movie of this book you
He's
haven't
like, let me
even
make a
finished.
movie out of this awesome story. Yeah.
Well, that was kind of like...
Oh,
Yeah, go
sorry. One other thing was Spielberg mentioned before the novel was even finished, he started like storyboarding it before there was even a script
So good.
from the unfinished novel.
That's awesome.
So that he got a head start on it.
Yeah, that's sweet. I was just going to say that reminds me a lot of Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. So if you guys don't know, like 2001 A Space Odyssey, like Kubrick was making the movie while Arthur C. Clarke was still writing the book. Like they were happening simultaneously. So it just kind of reminds me of that, of like this director that like finds out about the story and like low-key is like he's storyboarding it and stuff while the writer's actually finishing the book. But yeah, I think it's cool. Not only that...
It's like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. Except, I mean, obviously this turned out a lot... I mean, I haven't seen any Game of Thrones, but I just know people hate the ending.
Yeah.
Wait, you said you haven't either?
No.
Oh my god, guys, we're like the only podcast on Earth where every member hasn't seen Game of Thrones.
I've only seen season 1 and then I
Yeah.
stopped.
I have no plans to watch it.
Yeah.
But I just think it's cool not only that he... Like, screenwriting and novel writing are like such completely different skills, so the fact that he's talented at both is in and of itself like such a like feat, and it just goes to show like he's a talented writer. But then also, even let's say he wasn't the main screenwriter, to have him on board and working on the adaptation of it would have still been cool in and of itself, just because I know there's like a lot of writers whose original work ends up getting like used and they're not even talked to. Like it's just kind of like we've bought it from you and now we're just gonna adapt
This is
it.
ours
It's
now.
ours. And it's just like I feel like whenever you see a really, really good adaptation of something, the original writer was involved in some capacity or another.
Absolutely.
So it's just I like seeing that like artistic integrity. It's just cool to see that happen.
Yeah, it's nice to see artistic integrity.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so
you're
rare
right.
these
Also,
days.
on your note about like his skill as both the writer and screenwriter, you're totally right, because it's basically he wrote an excellent novel and then he was asked to take, it's almost as if the editor of the novel asked him to take only the vital, most enjoyable things that still made it a perfectly functioning story, and he did that into a 2-hour screenplay.
Yeah.
Like he turned it into 120 pages basically.
It reminds me a lot of William Goldman, who wrote the novel The Princess Bride, but then also wrote the screenplay for The Princess Bride. And like his whole career, he's been like, or I mean, he's passed away now, but his whole career, he was constantly going between novels and screenplays. And there was actually a couple of books that he wrote the novel for, but then would write the screenplay after. And it's just, again, like you have to be such a talented writer to be able to do that, and to be able to like look at this piece of work that you spent years on and then go, cool, we're cutting this and cutting this and cutting this and we're gonna change this and whatever, because like, oh man, like I feel like that would be so tough to do. So to be able to do that and do it well is such an amazing thing. But Dan, I didn't realize, so David Koepp was the second writer on this. I know that name. Like, what else has he written? Because I do recognize that name.
Well, he wrote, I think, the second one. Let me look it up real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it. I just, because the name's so familiar, but I can't put it to anything.
He wrote the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
That's what it is. That's why I knew it. I was like, where do I know this guy from?
Why do we keep coming
And he
back
also
to
wrote
this
the-
film?
All roads lead back to Spider-Man.
Yeah. I can't wait until we do the episode. He also wrote the first Mission Impossible.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's definitely where I know him from and where I've seen his name.
Oh, I forgot. He also wrote Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So that's what I was saying, where it's like, yeah, after that sort of like golden age for him, it didn't really go so well.
That sucks.
So knowing that Michael Crichton was directly involved helped a lot. And I think I mentioned he wrote the Lost World.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen any of the original sequels?
No.
No.
Are they
I know
good?
you have strong
They're-
feelings about this, Dan. Why don't you go ahead and share them?
yeah, are they
since
good?
it's your
So-
episode, yeah.
They're not good, but the second one is the closest to being a good movie. It doesn't like even nearly stand up to the original.
Are
but
they also
the
based
second-
on novels? Or did they just...
the second
Just
one
the
is,
second
and I think
one.
that's the main reason why it works the most out of all of them, because it's actually based on one of Michael Crichton's. It was a sequel to the novel, and Ian Malcolm comes back. I'm not sure how much of that is true in the novel. I have no idea about the novel, but Ian Malcolm is the main character. He's the only returning.
That I
Well,
know.
actually, John Hammond has a brief like cameo role, and so do the kids, but they're out of it for the rest of the movie. It has cool stuff.
Okay.
Like there are some memorable moments in it, but it's not enough to counteract all the stupid shit in that movie.
Yeah.
We should do an episode like on all of the sequels actually, like down the road. I think that would be very fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got, like I said, I watched the whole original trilogy as a kid so many times. The third one too, which I absolutely despise now. It's not a good movie. It doesn't even, like, the second one has cool stuff that can bring you back. The third one is just dumb. But yeah, so obviously I have like a connection to them, but I can fully admit they are not half of what the original film is.
To answer your question, I read maybe the first quarter of the Lost World novel. I never ended up finishing it, mostly just because like school, and then I just never picked it up again. But Ian Malcolm was the only returning character in that, and he was like kind of the protagonist, so that is close.
Yeah, he is the protagonist.
Yeah. And then I just want to touch on the third one, which I haven't seen, but there's that GIF and just that clip that I've seen everywhere on the internet where Alan Grant is like having a dream, and he's like on an airplane, and he looks over. One? Yeah,
he's back.
Grant's back. He's back. Oh,
yeah,
Grant's back. And so he wakes, and so he's having this dream, and in the dream he's on this plane, and he looks over, and there's a velociraptor, and the velociraptor turns and just says Alan, and then he wakes up, and it's become like this GIF on the internet, and it's so funny because it's like, what the hell is this?
It's shit like that makes the third one just dumb. Also, William H. Macy has a major role in that movie.
Is he really?
Yeah.
What the hell? That's so weird.
Yeah, we should do an episode down the line on all just the sequels.
Yeah, I would be so intrigued.
It would be fun.
Okay, now can we please talk about the best scene in the film? Not the best scene, but the most interesting one, the conversation. I just think, in general, I'm not really a debater, but I just think this is such a well-written debate scene. Yeah. Just everyone had such good points, and it was so logical and believable and smart, and I was so invested. I made notes on like every point everyone was saying. I was like, yeah, no, you're right, that is very well worded.
Yeah. This scene is why I like Aaron Sorkin movies, because they're basically all his movies are just this scene for 2 hours, but it goes to like something that we talked about. I think I brought this up on the Mother podcast, which I can't believe we're still referring back to that. Like,
we'll be referring back to that.
Hey, there's a reason forever. We did that episode so early.
Yeah. Setting
up things.
Something I talked about a lot in that podcast was how the points of view that the director/writer didn't have were the points of view that were like the shittiestly made. And how it was very much like a straw man, like, look at this crazy person making a point, and like we're gonna say that point's wrong because they're a crazy person making a point. And I really appreciate in debate scenes and just argument scenes in general in movies where everyone is like making the most best / like good faith version of the argument that they can make. Like, no one in the scene besides maybe the lawyer, but he's more like comedic relief in the scene. No one in the scene comes off like an ass. Like, I fully understand everyone's position, and they're all making really coherent points to support their position. And as much as Hammond isn't doing the right thing, like, I also don't think he comes across like a stereotypical like mustache twirling villain.
Well, because like to him, he fully believes that he is in the right. He's like, no, I want people to marvel at nature, and he thinks that's fine. Like, yeah, he is probably a billionaire and would probably make a bunch of money, and I would hate him for it, but like he kept being like, this is a biological theme park as opposed to like your usual robots and roller coasters and whatever. And I get like, I understand that. He calls it a preserve
a couple times.
Yeah.
Almost like a sanctuary is probably how he sees it.
Yeah. And so like that's also why it's so fascinating, because it so easily could have just been a person who stumbled upon this idea and is exploiting it solely for money. But you can tell, and I think also that's why the introduction of his grandchildren is so important, because it also helps to demonstrate what his goal is and kind of like maybe even his inspiration. You know, he wants the next generation to respect nature the way he does, and so that's also why it's so hard for everyone to get it across to him that, no, this is not a good idea and bad and will kill people, and that proved to be right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you even get that, like, it's kind of comedic, but throughout the movie, he keeps saying, like, oh, we spared no expense. We spared no expense. He says it, like, so many times.
I love that
Me
line.
too, but I think it also just goes to show, like, yeah, like, the biggest thing for him is, like, the, like, wonder of it. And that he's, like, not necessarily interested in how much money he's going to make. Which I think, makes his argument a lot stronger. But then... Also, everyone else has really good points. As like Jeff Goldblum, like pretty much all of his iconic lines from the movie are in this scene. Like I wrote a couple down. There's the one like, before you know what you had, you packaged it and put it on a lunchbox or whatever, which I think it's like really good. And then there's the one, you were so busy thinking about if you could, you didn't think about if you should, which is again another like iconic movie line. And it's just it's such a wonderful scene. And it's such a wonderful like. Right after we've had all this crazy shit and we've seen the dinosaurs and we've seen the lab, whatever, we're all gonna like come back and sit down and just talk about stuff for like 5 to 10 minutes.
But even at the same time, I'm surprised at how calm everyone stayed, because even then, like, to your point, Jeff Goldblum said stuff like, your genetic power is being wielded like a kid who found his dad's gun, and like the rest of the quote you mentioned earlier, like, you stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could. Like, if I was the one whose those comments were directed to, I would be like insulted. Like, you think I just didn't do anything and I'm just taking credit for what these geniuses said? And like, he did get a little offended and like obviously defended himself, and he's like, if there was more to it, like I did more than just like steal this technology or whatever. But like, I think because everyone's arguments were so well worded and so like well based, like no one could really be mad, because they're like, okay, like there's like some truth in that. And they had like really good rebuttals, and I really appreciated it, and it was good. But the lawyer was annoying.
The lawyer was
annoying. They always are,
Yeah, and it was pretty fitting that he was talking about like having an extremely expensive like admission fee in the thousands, and like all the merchandise that they would produce. But also going back to Hammond's, I guess, inspiration, like his character inspiration. There's the later scene, which is also at a dining table. There's a lot of good scenes at dining tables. The ice cream scene where he's talking about his flea circus that was his first attraction that he made when he was younger, and you get the sense that he's sort of like this like P.T. Barnum type guy. He's the ringleader, and he just wants, like, he made Jurassic Park not for the money, but to make a name for himself, but also to make one of the most legendary attractions ever. It wasn't just to turn a profit, it was to leave his mark and eventually pass it down to probably his grandchildren.
I just think it's great. And like to your point, Carol, about how like no one got overly like heated or whatever, I just think it, like, again, it's like no one is set up to be an asshole. Everyone is just everyone at that table is assuming that any criticism they're getting is genuinely just because they want the best possible thing to happen. It just feels like adults having a conversation, which a lot of times movies don't feel like. And I did really appreciate that, because again, you have to remember, like, all these people would be literally the best in their field at what they do, like super highly educated, and are probably used to constantly having to like defend their point of view and whatever. Like, all these people have PhDs, all these people have been doing this for years, and like Hammond has literally spent the last however many years having to convince people of like making Jurassic Park, and we have to do all this shit. And so I think it's great. I think it's a great scene. I love everything about it.
And this isn't part of this scene, but I also appreciate how later on they come back to the point about how the dinosaurs and humans are separated by however many millions of years, like 65 millions of years of evolution between them, and then to just reintroduce them back into our world and to just hope it'll turn out okay is so ridiculous.
Yeah, like that's so fucked.
Yeah, to think about. Well, because even like one of in actually the debate they were talking about, I think Hammond said, how can we stand in the light of discovery and not act? But then I don't remember who rebutted this, because I didn't quote that well, but someone said they called discovery the rape of the natural world, because it's like they didn't ask, like, it's true, like they didn't ask to be reborn. The world wasn't ready for this or expecting this, and it's not going to turn out well.
And Malcolm even talks about how because Hammond makes he defends himself by saying, when condors were about to go extinct, we put in like we initialized a program to save them. And Malcolm like argues that this is not the same thing, because dinosaurs were naturally selected out of existence, and I like that it actually like took the care to go into the biological, or like I guess the biology of it, and like the theory behind why extinct species from like millions of years ago shouldn't be given another shot, but like if it's a species that's harmed by human interaction, because of our technological advancement, it should be, and it's two very different scenarios.
I also really appreciated that distinction. That's what I'm saying, just the scene was so smart.
So what's your guys' favorite scene?
I think my favorite scene is the introduction of Hammond in that trailer, RV, whatever. Because I also, like, not only did I love the back and forth between them, and also just his introduction, this is the scene that I replayed to, like, write down some funny quips. Even at the beginning, when Hammond is introducing the island, but never explicitly saying what it is, very smart on his part, but he says attractions that will drive the kids wild, and Dr. Grant goes, "What are those?" and Laura Dern, I don't remember her character's name, says, "Small versions of adults, honey." That was so funny. But yeah, that whole scene, because not only did I appreciate, obviously, as we said a million times, character introduction was great, dialogue was great. I also even just loved the set dressing of that RV. I was just like so intrigued as to everything that was in there, and I kept wanting to like zoom in on the background elements. I just even really appreciated the detail there.
It's all cramped.
Yeah,
it's like that's how it actually would be.
And they were also like comically covered in dust because of the helicopter coming in. Like they were just fully like brown on half of their bodies. It was so good.
I have like my real answer, but then I have like a couple of scenes that aren't my favorite, but I just want to talk about them at some point on this podcast.
For sure.
My favorite is, I think, the T-Rex attack, like that, and like that whole sequence from wait, where are they? Cut to the goat. From that to like the end of that whole sequence is like what I think of when I think of Jurassic Park. As much as the stuff with the raptors later is great, like that is just so insane to me that it works as well as it does. And like we talked about the choreography of like having the two different cars in different places, and the flare, and Jeff Goldblum running with the flare, and just like how the scene escalates.
He didn't need to do that.
No, but
Dr.
it's
Grant
also
already had a handle.
He didn't, but it was very
it was very heroic. Good for him. It's so good, and it's so like frustrating in parts, but good frustrating, where because it's like tense and you're like, fuck, like get out of the situation. I just think it's like a perfect sequence. I think the special effects look like we were talking about. You literally can't tell if it's CG or animatronic because it just looks real. Like that T-Rex looks incredible. That entire scene. Also, we were talking about how Dan, you were talking about how that was like a set so they could have like rain machines, and I couldn't help but think about that scene in Space Cop when, to film the scene, they just had someone stand on top of a roof with a hose to like drench them with water, and I was just thinking about like the difference in filmmaking approaches there. And I was imagining like someone just with like a hose trying to like convince the scene that it was like rain over the T-Rex.
You have like all this work going into the animatronics and the set design, but the rain machine is just some dude with a hose.
Oh my god, so funny. Okay.
Also, sorry, before you go on to the next scene, while we're on this scene, fun fact about this scene is, and you guys may have actually heard this before. This is a popular fun behind the scenes fact, but they had a lot of problems with the rain machine and the T-Rex animatronic, and it would often get jittery because the rubber skin of it would soak up a lot of the water, and it would like change the weight of the whole thing. So all of these like predetermined movements and calculations were off now because of the weight of the animatronic was different. So like it would also malfunction a lot. So this totally fake T-Rex would often scare the crew as if they were working with an actual like living thing. And one of the lines in the documentary is, I think Stan Winston says this. He's like, it was really nice to see the T-Rex go into the scene and act because it wasn't like a set. This is gonna work. Yeah. You have to actually work with it in this. That's so cool. Like you have to work with it as an actor in this.
I didn't even think about that. It's animatronic and therefore it should not be wet.
Yeah. So there was the guy that was in charge of drying it off. He's like, guys, can we please just stop for 5 minutes so I can pat it down? And that was like a constant thing that they had to keep stopping for, was to dry it off.
Wow, that's awesome. So stressful. He's like, I just want to protect my baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, this super expensive robot.
It reminds me of the guy in Return of the Jedi, the Rancor guy, you know, like when the Rancor dies and the guy's like, oh, you died. Yeah, my other two, I just want to quickly say them here, scenes. It's just one, I like when when Jeff Goldblum is explaining chaos theory to Laura Dern, because it is just the most Jeff Goldblum thing you've ever seen. Just like his level of flirting with her. And, like, Grant is literally sitting right there the whole time. And he's just, like, watching Jeff Goldblum, like, okay, so hold out your hand. And he's, like, putting it, and he, like, says about...
He's, like, playing with her hair.
Yeah, and he's, like, the, like, imperfections. And she's, like, imperfections. He's, like, oh, microscopic, I'm sure. And it's just, like, oh, my God. Like, it's so Jeff Goldblum, and I love it. It's such a good scene.
I thought, though, you were going to talk about the scene in the helicopter when he's, like, talking about strange attractors. And he's, like, Dr. Sadler, I refuse to believe that you... are unfamiliar with the concept of attraction. Yeah. And again, like, Alan's right there.
He's so horny.
I mean, it's not clear that they're together, technically.
No, sure.
So.
Yeah,
sure.
Not yet.
He does ask
then
later.
He does explicitly ask.
Yeah, to be fair.
Yeah, and then he backs
After
off.
he's been flirting with her for 2 days, he's like, hey, are you guys together? Or...
I'm looking for a new ex-wife.
Yeah. The other one is just Nidri's death. Because I don't think I've ever seen a character be portrayed more pathetic, because he's like he like crashes his car, gets out, it's raining, and then he just like slips.
Also, he's trying to drive off of a waterfall.
Yeah, I don't.
How lost can you get?
He gets out of his car and slips and just like tumbles down the hill, and he just very slowly kind of falls down the hill, and then the dinosaur shows up. And just the whole thing, he's like, here, you want a stick? You want to play fetch? You want a stick? And then he throws it like, yeah, go get the stick. And then the dinosaur doesn't leave, and he's just like, okay. And then he like tries to climb back.
He's like, no wonder you went extinct.
Tries to climb back up the hill, and he just keeps tripping and falling on his way up. And like, it is just the most pathetic I've ever seen a character in a movie. Like, just cannot do anything. It's so... Yeah. I know you should feel bad because he horrifically dies, but like, it's so funny. It's so fucking funny, the whole thing.
The thing about Nedry too, though, is you're right. Like, that's he has a very like pathetic portrayal in that scene. But even that character, you find not agreeing with, but you understand his motivations. Yeah. Of it's as simple as he wasn't being paid enough. Yeah. So he's like, okay, I'm going to sort of defect to this other corporation who's trying to catch up on the research that InGen is doing. Mm-hmm. So like, even he's a very minor character, but even his motivations are well set up.
Sure, and I do think throughout like most of the movie, he is portrayed to be a bit more like still comedic, but he has more like normal like characteristics of like a character. It's just like in his final scene, and it's probably a deliberate choice because he has been such a scumbag that in his final scene he gets no dignity. Like, it's like no dignity for this character. He falls like 20 times. He looks like an idiot the whole time. He's like trying to play fetch with a dinosaur. Like, he's just an idiot the whole time.
Well, even like he was introduced in that ridiculous like floral shirt. Like, it's very on brand. Or even his background just being, for some reason, like, was it a cow print bikini? A woman in a... Yeah. It was such a weird pattern. And like when you didn't like type in the magic word for his code, even just like the little bobblehead pop-up that he manufactured to come up was just all very, very Nedry.
Nedry.
I don't know.
Also, guys, I love in the scene where he meets up with Dodgson to get the money and the Barbasol thing to store the embryos
I think I know what you're gonna say.
And he tests it out, and it's an actual functioning shaving cream thing, and he wipes it on this piece of pie that's next to him that someone's gonna
so
eat.
Good, it's so funny.
Such an asshole move.
Oh my god,
it's really funny. I also noted that I didn't take a note of it, but I remember noticing and thinking it hilarious.
Dan, what's your favorite scene?
Yeah.
So my favorite scene is definitely the velociraptors in the kitchen scene. I also, this is just a minor thing, but I love how it's like symbolic that it's in a kitchen, because it's like now the humans are being served up to the dinosaurs.
Symbolism.
Yeah. No, but I love this scene because for me, it's if you had to pick one scene, and it's not just this scene, but if you had to pick one scene for me in this movie that nails the tension, it's this scene, because the room is quiet. The by this point, you're familiar with how smart these animals are. Like, they open doors. That moment when you see it open the door.
Well, even they're
and
like, oh, we're only in trouble if they learn how to open a door.
If they learn to open doors. And then next shot is them figuring out how to open the door, but not comedically. It's not like them barging into the room. Like, they're figuring it out, you know? They're thinking. And I think earlier on, Marco, when you were talking about how there's some things in the movie that could have gone in a stupid direction but didn't, that's probably one of the things
absolutely that
to.
could have been so stupid.
In another movie that could have been really dumb, but in this movie it's so scary that that's how smart these animals were. And for the record, I took a dinosaur class in university that I just finished, and it's true, like the velociraptors and their group were like one of the smartest groups of dinosaurs that ever existed. They had like a huge brain to body mass ratio. So again, like based in scientific theory. But yeah, this whole scene, and going back to how I said like the room is so quiet, so every little movement is going to be projected and like give your position away.
Right.
And like just going back to what I was saying about if I was in this scene, like I would be so dead. And that's the scariest thing to me.
Well, but I guess even like they got away by luck because the girl, like the velociraptor, thought the reflection was her, and so it ran at her reflection in the fridge or whatever.
Yeah, because it's not really made clear if she like planned for that.
No, I don't think
think
so.
she
I think
would
it was
have,
just sheer luck.
She's just like a kid.
Yeah. No, but
Yeah.
I love
that was cool though.
No, that was like really funny because even I thought it was her. I don't know if like we were meant to know immediately, but I was like, oh, she's done. Like I don't remember her dying, but I guess she does. And then having the velociraptor bounce off.
Yeah, and then Tim locks the other one in the
freezer.
The freezer.
Yeah.
That shot was really tense when he's like limping and trying to outrun a velociraptor.
Yeah. I have notes being like, you really think you can outrun a velociraptor? They clock
even
them
with
as
two
fast
fully
as
functioning
she does.
legs. Yeah. So yeah, that's my favorite scene for sure. That's the first scene that I think of when I think back to this movie.
Yeah,
Do you guys have a favorite character?
I'd have to say Alan because he was like, as a kid, he was my favorite character. If I was watching this for the first time as an adult, I would definitely say Ian Malcolm.
Same. Yeah.
How could you not? But just because of, I don't know, like I said in the intro, like I wanted to be a paleontologist. I basically wanted to be Alan Grant. I was basically Tim because Tim wanted to be Alan Grant in this movie. So I would probably say Alan Grant.
I think I would probably say Ian Malcolm just because I enjoy the comedic, to some degree, relief that he brings to the movie, but also he is really smart and like everything he says ends up coming true. So it's like this fun like dichotomy there where like he is ridiculous and silly because he's Jeff Goldblum, but like everything that he says actually kind of ends up happening. Although, yeah, I think Grant is a really good character. I wish Laura Dern, as the movie went on, had more to do because I feel like at the beginning, like they use her knowledge really, really well, and by the end...
you mean more to do as a botanist?
Yeah, like by the end of the movie, her botany skills... Maybe this sounds dumb, but like I feel like...
No, you
like I wish that, again, like played more into the ending somehow, because it is kind of a big deal for most of the first act of the movie. But yeah, I would probably say Ian Malcolm overall is my favorite character. Carol?
Yeah, I was going to say I think Dr. Sattler's my favorite, but I don't know if that's just because I love Laura Dern. I did appreciate Malcolm because of a lot of his quips and stuff, but like at the same time when he was like hitting on Sattler at some points, I was like, I hate you.
Yeah,
so it was kind of like a
straight...
love-hate thing, so I don't think
Sure.
I could make him like my favorite because I was very much like, this is funny and a good point, but also I think you're a scumbag.
Yeah, I mean he definitely is a scumbag. Yeah.
But yeah, I did also like feel though like that's why I'm not sure if I like Dr. Sattler because I love Laura Dern, because like I also feel like, yeah, she identified a leaf and like stayed with this dinosaur who was poisoned, but like otherwise, and like towards the end, like she did help turn on the fences almost to the killing of a few kids, but so like she did do stuff.
Yeah,
but I did also feel like she was underutilized. And like obviously it's based on a book, like maybe just Dr. Sattler didn't do much, like that's not like the movie's fault. But yeah, I did feel like she kind of disappeared.
She has a good line during the dinner scene where she's like, she talks about a lot of the plants being poisonous, but Hammond picked them because they look nice, which is another like perfect, like that's Hammond's character. I also like the running. It's sort of like I'd call it a running joke through the movie of like a lot of the herbivores being sick because of the vegetation.
Yeah.
Well, because they're
the
like, oh,
choices
they
in
don't
vegetation.
eat it. Like, why would they eat the plants that
Yeah.
are around? That's ridiculous.
But do they? Yeah. So the Triceratops is sick, and then like the Brachiosaurs have a cold
Yeah.
because of like the choices in vegetation. Like it's like these are Hammond's decisions that affected this, and she identified that like right off the bat.
See, I like that too. That would be my only negative though, is that I kind of felt like maybe that would somehow directly come up in the third act, like that specific botany thing. But the fact that it doesn't like make the third act worse. It just means that her character ends up doing something that any character could have done. Like she's basically just holding doors closed. Like I think the last thing that she does that's very specifically kind of her is like Carol was talking about when she gets the electricity back on. But after that, it's like you could have subbed her out with anyone else in the third act and they would have done the same thing. But yeah, I mean, overall, I still think she's a cool character, and yeah, fun choice to make her specifically like a paleobotanist. Like that's such a, and again from the book, but it's such a cool specific thing that she has knowledge of. That, you know, again, in a dumber movie, it just would have been two paleontologists. But it's like, no, like he's a paleontologist, but she is specifically a paleobotanist, so she has a like different set of skills that as the movie goes on we see less of, but cool nonetheless.
And even on top of her being a paleobotanist, she's also in a relationship with Grant. Like it's their relationship as just human beings to consider too, and by the end it's essentially you have a couple looking after children, which is what she wanted, and what we have to convince Grant. Like that's sort of part of his arc is like learning to like
not hate children,
not bully children,
not leave a car because a child is in it. I found that so funny when they're getting in the tour cars. He gets in one side, the kid follows, he immediately gets out the other door.
I know.
And he slams the door in his face.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, so even like their professions aside, which is the reason why they're on the island, but their professions aside, they're still human beings in a relationship with each other too.
I do kind of wish, because like after they get off the island, the movie like straight up ends, which as it should. Like I don't want to see them like go home and whatever, but and
talk about their experience. Like,
but I just wish there was like at some point or another some like line or indication that his feelings about children had changed to her. Like as an audience, we've seen him interact with these kids and we understand that okay, he's come to be more of like a fatherly figure, whatever. But like their relationship was so like throughout the movie up until they get separated, there are so many moments of her like saying like you have to like children, and like not you have to like children, but like why don't you like children? Like what's your problem? And I just wish like once they got back together there was maybe like a specific moment for her to realize his change as we the audience have like seen his change, if that makes sense. But watching the movie, I don't know where you put that in organically without it being like kind of a weird thing. So I don't know.
I'd argue that you do get that though, because in one of the last shots it's Ellie, Ian, and Hammond on one side of the helicopter, and then Grant is like holding the two kids.
That's what I was gonna say.
And he looks at her and she smiles back, sort of suggesting that that's shared between them, even if after the events of the movie.
Okay.
And maybe he does want to have kids.
I'll buy that. Fair enough.
Because even earlier, like, he wouldn't even let the girl hold his hand. Like, the fact that he now, like, has his arms around two children is, like, a wordless way of just showing that change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair point, guys. Fair point.
What an adult conversation we just had.
Yeah, we discussed it like
you guys just made the movie even better for me. So, I want to poke fun at one other thing. I know I just said it was just the girl with her weird setup payoffs, but there is one other thing I just want to poke fun at, which is the electrocution when the power comes back on.
Oh my god.
Because
wouldn't he die?
Listen, the electrical engineer in me, I was like, oh, at least they stopped his heart. For some reason, I remember in this scene that his heart didn't stop, that like he just falls and they catch him. But no, they do. His heart does stop, so fair enough. Fair enough. You did that. If you were holding on to 10,000 volts, and it was
a tiny boy,
and the charge was enough to push you away, you would be burnt to shit. Like you would have like you would be burned from that much electricity. Like I've seen, like you can see sometimes like a guy at my work was telling a story one time about how like someone was inside a panel doing something while there was like 400 volts on it, and they had like a metal screwdriver, and they didn't realize that the power was on, and they went near it, and like an electrical like fireball shot out and like smacked the screwdriver like out of his hand. So like, if you were dealing with 10,000 volts, as we see a bunch of times, and you were holding on to it with your bare hands, he would be eviscerated. He would be so dead. Yeah, I just, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for that. I don't know how he is alive. I mean, I'm glad they stopped his heart and that they'd have to do CPR to bring him back, because that is at least believable, but, like, he should be burnt. Like,
but both
he
of
shouldn't
those
be
kids in general must be so traumatized. Like, even when they left him in the car, or, like, they had to, but, like, they left him in the car, and then the car ended up in a tree. When they said, like, they have to go back for him, I fully did not expect him to be just sitting in this car in the tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was just fine.
Because even I thought he was under the car. So I was like, when did he crawl back into it in time for it to fall? And him to be perfectly fine.
Unclear. But I do love how when Grant goes to the car and he says, "I threw up," and then Grant's like, "Okay, we won't tell anyone you threw up. It's okay." Like, that was such a like little kid moment.
Yeah.
Where I was like, that's fun. Like, that is such a little kid thing to do.
But also them climbing down the tree faster than the car fell down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you? Yeah.
That's convenient that it had so many very strong branches, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely, when it comes to like the danger the kids are in, there is definitely a lot of convenience, but not to the point where I like genuinely care. Like, even with the electrocution scene, like, who cares? But it's definitely a little convenient, like, especially with like going back to the electrocution. when you're a part of like a live circuit, like your muscles tighten, so he probably shouldn't have been pushed off. He probably should have just been stuck on there being electrocuted. Like, that's what would happen. That's why people generally, like, if you electrocute to death, that's what happens. It's because you can't let go because like your muscles have contracted. So there's definitely some convenience with the kids being alive by the end of this movie, but it's a movie about fucking dinosaurs, so like, it's okay.
No, for sure. It wasn't to its detriment, but I was just like, this lucky guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Oh, just another weird thing I noticed is when she goes to turn the power on and she opens up the electrical panel, and then there's like switches on the outside of a door. So normally when you have control panels, you would have the switches on the outside of the door, and then you open the door and all the wiring's inside. But for some reason she opens the door and then there's another door with switches. So I was like, why is there two doors on this control panel? That's kind of a weird design choice. Just the designer in me, I was like, that's weird. Why would you do that? Like, do you need extra safety in this room? I don't think so. I don't think there would be any requirement for it. Dan, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
Okay, it's a two-part question. Question 1. Is this your first time seeing this movie since we saw it in theaters?
No. I think I've seen it once or twice since.
Okay, then, so it was my first time since you and I went to see it. So my second part of the question is, that first time you watched it after seeing it in theaters, did your opinion of it in any way change?
That's a good question. I'd probably say no, just because like even by the point of seeing it in theaters, I had seen it so many times that it's just like, this is what the movie is to me now. Like I think there's a point where you see a movie enough times that your opinion is probably never going to change again. But like I said in the intro, it was amazing being able to see your favorite movie on the big screen, because I think every movie should be viewed ideally on a theater screen. So seeing your favorite movie that came out before you were born on the big screen was an incredible opportunity that I'm still super stoked that we got to do that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I love also like that everyone we saw it with was clearly also just a big fan of the movie, so everyone just kind of shut up and watched the movie. There wasn't like annoying teenagers that were like being annoying. The only reason I asked is because this is my first time since we saw it in theaters, and I did, not that my opinion of the movie changed, but having now seen it in theaters on a big screen with like a proper sound system and stuff, when we got those few moments of like awe, so like when they first saw the dinosaurs, or like at the end with the T-Rex and like the sign like falls and drapes it down or whatever, like it did feel a little bit not bad, like there's still awesome moments, but I was just kind of like, like I wish I was watching this in a theater again, because like to have the music and the big screen and everything, it was like such an not in like a like personal way, but like a life-changing experience. Not that like my life personally changed, but just like now having seen it like that, when I watch those scenes not like that, I am kind of like, man, I wish I could see it like that again.
For sure. I think that's with every movie.
Yeah.
It's like, it's never, unless you have like a professional home theater, it's never gonna,
Can you imagine?
it's always gonna pale in comparison.
It would be so nice.
Yeah. It's always gonna pale in comparison to going to the movie theater with like the setup that they have there and the size of the screen and like the visuals being projected onto this like enormous screen and the sound system. Yeah. It can't compare. I mean, you're 100% right, but like I said, I think that's just the problem that you have with watching any movie at home.
Yeah, for sure.
It is better if you watch with headphones, though. I watched with headphones.
Oh, really?
And it's really nice. It's always better watching with
I've
headphones.
never watched
Yeah.
movies
Try
with headphones.
But guys, we haven't talked about the score yet,
Yes. Good point.
and we have to because this is, I think this is probably my favorite movie score. Not just because it's my favorite movie, but it probably actually is my favorite movie score. John Williams is a legend. He's my favorite composer, and this is my favorite work of his.
Yeah, I have notes specifically, even just like when they first approach the island in that helicopter, just like chills because of the music. The music kicks in, and I'm like, oh, it's happening.
I also love that we don't get the music until they get to the island.
Yeah.
Like, because it then becomes so tied to the island, like that iconic score. And I also love, like, again, to like John Williams' brilliance, is that this movie has like two iconic like themes in it. There's like the one when they first get to the island, but then there's also the one when they first see the dinosaurs, and like they're different themes, but they're both equally iconic for being in this movie, which is just, again, like it's so great. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's like the more impending theme that in my mind I think of it as like the T-Rex theme, because it plays during the final T-Rex roar in the Welcome Center, and then there's the gentler one where you first hear it in the Brachiosaurus scene, which is my favorite of the two. And in particular, I like when it comes back in like a lullaby version, sort of almost, with the triangle. I think like the instrument, the triangle.
Yes.
And it's like the scene where Grant and the kids are falling asleep on the big tree, and it also comes back in the very final helicopter scene.
So Dan, this is you said you think this might be your favorite film score?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, because a question I was going to ask, so you've already answered, but I was going to say, like, where does this rank in all of our like John Williams film scores?
Yeah. So I guess to answer again, I probably would. I mean, it's hard to give like a absolute answer, but just tying it with the visual context of the scenes, like when you imagine the music, you imagine the scenes. Like you were saying, the theme when it kicks in, when they first arrive at the island, it's so closely tied to Jurassic Park, like the location. So all of that considered, yes, I would probably consider this my favorite. But we should probably, do you want to talk about some of the other iconic John Williams scores? Like, so what's he done?
Guys, I just pulled up a list. We can't name them all.
No, I know, it's everything.
No, just the most iconic
like,
ones. He did Indiana Jones, Star Wars. He did the classic Harry Potter theme, which is another
Home Alone,
Superman.
Oh, Home Alone. That's
my
right.
favorite. I'm just spoiling
Superman.
that immediately. That's my favorite.
So I mean,
E.T.
Yes.
Yeah, E.T. It could be impossible for someone to name their favorite John Williams score, but short answer, yes.
Okay. This for me always falls somewhere in my top 4. I have a hard time differentiating. My top 4 being like Star Wars, and when I say Star Wars, I mean all of Star Wars, because even within Star Wars there are like different themes, but you can't, like, it would be too much. So like all of Star Wars, probably like Indiana Jones, and then like Superman and this are like my top tier John Williams, and I don't, like, depending on what mood I'm in, any one of those could become my number one. So it's definitely in my like greatest of all time top tier list. I don't know, like, if you ask me right now if it's number one, I don't know. I might say Star Wars over it, just because, like, I don't know, because I wish Star Wars was good. Maybe that's why I'm saying Star Wars. But yeah.
Can we just recognize, though, that even though the sequels didn't go in a great direction, like, he nailed, like, there was new elements to the score that really
absolutely
worked.
John Williams, master.
He did new things that worked,
he's
too.
incredible. Actually, fun, you know, all these movies we're going to talk about have really good music in them. So
that's
true.
Yeah.
Especially the music.
Marco, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, Dan, what's up?
because I've never really been sure about this. Do you prefer, and this is a hard question to answer, but do you prefer Hans Zimmer or John Williams?
Oh, John Williams. It's John Williams. Not because I think, listen, Hans Zimmer is, I think, fantastic. And when a movie's coming out and I hear he's scoring it, I'm like, hells yeah. Like, he is the best. But just the sheer volume of work of what John Williams has done, and also how, like, there's something about Hans Zimmer where everything feels, all his music feels related to each other for me. Like, when you hear
I get that.
like maybe not even Interstellar might be, I think, my favorite of his, but I would say, like, when you hear Inception compared to The Dark Knight compared to Blade Runner 2049, it's like it all kind of feels like it's from the same instruments and in the same, like, family, the Hans Zimmer, like, family of music. Whereas I think with John Williams, like, why his scores are so iconic is because everything feels so individualistic to the movie he's making. Like, the Superman theme is iconic to Superman, and it is completely different from Jurassic Park, which is completely different from Raiders, which is completely different from Star Wars. And then even within Star Wars, it's like you have the Star Wars main theme, which is different from the Force theme, which is different from the Empire.
Luke's
like
theme,
yeah, like
Duel of the Fates.
Oh my god. And, like, I think also something about, like, a film score, and I actually do get kind of geeky about film music. I don't know why. It's always something I paid attention to, but
I never
like,
pay attention. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I've always paid attention to, and, like, even, like, I'm such a sucker. Like, it can be a bad movie, but if you do, like, a callback with, like, a musical theme and, like, you bring a character's musical theme back, I'm like, fantastic. And everyone's like, this is a stupid movie, and I'm like, nope, that was awesome. I love that. But something that I think is, like, so brilliant about his scores is that if you watch the movie dialogue list and just, like, watch the scenes with his score behind it, I feel like it completely tells the story of what you're watching. And I would say that, like, in particular, I think for Star Wars and even, like, Superman, where it's just, like, every piece of music on those tracks, and Indiana Jones, like, fuck it, like, it's so good. Whereas I think Hans Zimmer is really good at doing, like, creating a tone. But I don't know, like, I couldn't hum a Hans Zimmer piece of music. And I don't feel like if I watch a movie dialogue list, his music would tell the story, because it all just kind of feels like it's setting the tone constantly, if that makes sense.
Also, I feel like with Hans Zimmer, he's kind of, I mean, maybe he could prove us wrong, but I feel like all of his movies that he does compose for are kind of similar. Like, there are very clearly, like, types of movies, like a rom-com. Hans Zimmer would never. Whereas, like, John Williams, I feel like could cover... I feel like John Williams could cover all the genres, you know? Flawlessly. Yeah. And it would make sense, and it would work, and it would be great. But for Hans Zimmer, it would have to be,
I always
like,
forget
dark.
that he did Home Alone.
Yeah. Well, if it was a rom-com like Hans Zimmer, it would have to go at some point, because that's, like, his, like, signature. Yeah. But not, again, like, and not to diminish, and also I do think, like, there definitely are movies where I think he steps out of his comfort zone. Like, I think Interstellar is very different. Like, even though it has, like, the loud, like, tones, I feel like it's way more, like, melodic. There's more melody to that. And then also I feel like Man of Steel,
Lion King.
Actually, oh shit, did he score Lion King?
Like,
well, he composed, I think.
Which one?
The original one?
Yeah. And I think the remake.
I mean, the remake is just the original one again, so, like...
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And he also did...
Maybe he proved me wrong.
Oh, wait, did he do Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah, he did.
That's one of my favorites.
Yes, and I think... So, again, like, I do think he does have examples of that. Like, I think, like, Pirates is a good example. I think Man of Steel, actually, is really different from a lot of his other stuff. Like, again, it's more melodic.
Very guitar heavy.
Yeah, and the other one is... I know this is really random, but the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, which I love.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, I actually like them too.
And I think, oh my god, Sherlock Holmes.
Watch them all.
Sherlock Holmes episode.
Yeah,
we gotta do
You
it.
should. I haven't seen any of them.
You haven't seen them?
No, I've never seen them.
But you've seen the Sherlock, like, TV show, right?
Yeah, the Benedict Cumberbatch one.
I haven't watched them since I saw them in theaters, so I would be very down.
Oh, I love them. They're so good. But he does the music for that, and again, that one feels very unique to that world. So I don't know. I do feel like I think he is definitely second place, and I think he's second place with, like, a punch. Like, he deserves to be there, and I don't even know who I would put in third place, because, like, he is so good in his second place. But, like, John Williams is just, like, like, every iconic movie from 1970 to 2000 had, like, his music, and it all is different and amazing, and
Well, guys, I just want to personally thank you for sitting down to talk about a movie that is very special to me. So, next episode is going to be Carolina's selection episode. Do you want to announce what that's going to be?
My favorite film of all time, Mamma Mia. I had to do it. But yeah, it's going to be Mamma Mia. We're going to talk about it. Maybe I'll sing about it. We're going to have some special guests. And it should be a great time.
I think so. I'm very excited.
Looking forward to it.
Dan,
I've never seen it.
Yeah, I was going to say Dan's never seen it.
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to lie. The only person who sings live is Meryl Streep, so don't expect a Les Mis.
Yeah, we talked about this in the Les Mis
Yeah,
episode.
I mean, also just don't expect to
Yeah,
don't expect anything. Just watch it.
Yeah, I think we set you up wrong with Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
I think just go in blind.
Yeah. But I've seen this movie a bunch of times, and I love it, and I can't wait to talk about it. It's going to be a good time.
Tomorrow.
Well, I have to be honest. This is obviously this has been a big movie in pop culture, but I still have no clue what the story is about.
Dan,
I have no idea.
there's
that
a point in this
excites me
movie.
so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point in this movie where even I
know
lose
nothing
the
about this
thread
movie.
of what's happening. Like at a certain point, I'm just listening to music. So, but
I'm so
it's
excited.
it's a good time. The music's really good. Like if nothing else, the music is definitely really good. So
We love
you will
ABBA.
enjoy. Yeah, ABBA.
And then, do we want to announce yours?
Yeah, I
Marco?
think we may have talked about it. I don't know if we did, but I am doing Social Network, which will be the week after Mamma Mia. So queue up. I believe it's on Netflix. It's like perpetually on Netflix. So queue it up, watch it. I have a fun introduction planned for everyone, but really you got to make sure if you don't watch the movie, you won't get the introduction. So don't think you can just listen to our episode. You have to watch the movie to understand what the hell is happening. But yeah, it should be a good time. It's my favorite movie, I think. It's definitely in the contention for it. So
Yeah, so that's going to be the next slate of couple of episodes. Thank you all, as always, for listening. We very much appreciate you.
We do.
And now, to sign us off from this episode, we have a special treat from Marco playing a short snippet of the Jurassic Park score on his high school trumpet.
yeah, I just want to let everyone know that I won the music award in grade school music. Then I played in concert band through all of high school, practiced hours on end every day. We played a lot of music. I actually was it's not really called the captain, but it's like the person that's second to the conductor. So when the conductor's gone, like I'm in charge of the band. Yeah, and I was the first trumpet, and I played a lot of trumpet in high school, and I was pretty good at it. So this is my rendition of the Jurassic Park theme for everyone's enjoyment. Fuck's sakes.